Hello everybody, this is Ethan. I hope you're all having a great day, and today I'm going to talk to you about something that you've probably been very primed to be against by big corporations, big tech, etc. Please try and keep an open mind. Today I'm going to be talking to you about socialism. So what is socialism? It's workers' control of the means of production. Now, means of production, what's that? Well, it's bit of a technical term that basically just means businesses. When workers control the bulk of businesses, especially big business, it's about the employee-employer relationship, or I guess the lack thereof. So if you are a worker in a business, you currently have a boss that privately owns that means of production, and most problems in society, material problems that is, not individual problems or more abstract problems, but genuinely most material problems in society can be traced back to private ownership of the means of production. So for example, bad hospital service. We live in a system that incentivizes cutting corners and pocketing as much as possible at every step of the supply chain. Sorry, I'm just reading some notes I took here because I just thought of this. But we live in that system. It incentivizes at every step of the way more being extracted off, more being skimmed off the top. That's why the NHS is getting less and less efficient, even though we're putting more and more money in, putting more and more percentage of the tax budget. And this incentivizes the intentional breaking of the NHS so that it can be replaced with private healthcare. The Tories, and I'm including Labour in that, they're red Tories, that's what I say. You've got red Tories and you've got blue Tories, but Labour, as they used to be called, are basically red Tories. But Tories, in general, want to intentionally make the NHS bulkier, slower, more horrible, less efficient by increasing the profit motive, which incentivizes them to keep doing that so that they can say, oh, the NHS, we just can't do it, we've got to have private healthcare. Look at this, we're spending 15% of the budget on the NHS, we need private healthcare. Because behind the scenes, all of the supply chains, all of the recruitment, all of the admin, you're adding more and more steps where more and more contractors, it's all about the contractors, can scrape off more of that budget. Want a higher wage? You're not involved in that decision-making process. You should be. You have a right to be. But your workplace is privately owned. Schools and buses, not up to scratch. Your school, nah. Your bus, oof. Again, intentional, because there's a profit motive. This system incentivizes as much tax money being funneled into private hands before any of it gets spent on a school, a bus, a teacher, a doctor. This system is called capitalism, and it's been the dominant political system for a couple hundred years. For all that time, the richest in society have been desperately trying to prevent an alternative system from being made and attempting to extract yet more and more wealth from the working class. But if you have workers control the means of production, you have democracy in your workplace, you have more of a say in that wage. If the buses are nationalised, if, there is less private back-end contracting put into schools. Yes, technically things like schools and things like hospitals are publicly owned, but the amount of privatisation that's going on behind the scenes, as soon as you introduce a profit motive, obviously the priority is profit. By definition, the priority is not saving people, the priority is not teaching your children, the priority is not getting you your bus on time. You need to take out that private ownership profit motive. So, sorry, I need to keep track of where I am, because this is like a loosely noted, loosely structured sort of speech, I guess you could call it. You're provided greater freedom. You're provided workplace democracy. Oh, and I forgot to mention right off the top that I'm going to be responding to some very lazy disinformation counter-arguments that have been pushed for a long time, and some of which you probably believe. I'm going to instantly dispel those crazy propagandized media arguments later on. Here's the thing, it all sounds very well and good. It all sounds very pie in the sky. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? But here's the thing about socialism and about the end of capitalism. It's not just good, it's necessary. There are a couple imminent, time-based factors which make it necessary. One is speculative bubbles leading to financial crashes, which only can happen under capitalism, and the other one is climate change. So firstly, with climate change, the profit motive overrules anything else. Why wouldn't it? So what we actually need in order to prevent the oncoming sort of collapse of you know, a large degree of human society is massive investment into things like renewables, nuclear fission, nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion's a bit more experimental, but we know for a fact that fission works. There is massive, unreasonable, foolish scaremongering. Not foolish, because that makes it sound like a mistake. Fraudulent, malicious scaremongering about nuclear fission. There was one nuclear disaster 40 years ago. There might have been one other one. In terms of the deaths caused, any stats out there, go look at any stats out there. The deaths caused by nuclear fission are nothing. Nuclear fission is proven, known, safe. Vast majority of nuclear power plants, they operate day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out. Very, very safe. Chernobyl happened because of Soviet mismanagement. And then there was one more genuine mistake caused by a massive tsunami in Japan that people didn't predict would be that big. And this was in either the 80s or the 90s, when their tsunami prediction software and hardware and equipment was nowhere near as good as it is now. There are particular exceptional reasons that are specific to those particular circumstances which made those circumstances unsafe. Nuclear fission is absolutely safe, and we need it. Over the past several decades, we got rid of fission power plants because, ooh, nuclear fission. For coal, for oil. We need fission, we need renewables, and we need to invest in fusion. Thing is, though, that goes against the sacred number one profit motive. That goes against that profit priority. Under capitalism, obviously, it sounds very simple. It sounds too simple. You want me to come at you with 10 billion academic arguments. Sometimes informed simplicity is the thing, which is the thing. The arguments for socialism are actually very simple. That's deceptively simple. You need to invest trillions of dollars and millions of hours of media time and have gigantic, massive media control to stand a chance of suppressing these things. These things are simple truths that people need to do gigantic gymnastics, mental gymnastics, financial gymnastics, media gymnastics to suppress. But it's very simple. If your entire socio-economic system has the number one priority of the profit motive, you're not going to make the investments necessary to save the planet. And it wouldn't just be climate change in our particular situation. On a theoretical level, if there was any threat of, you know, consumption, even on a different planet, if overconsumption led to any sort of threat, if you have a global system that only, well, not only, but almost only incentivizes the profit motive and the wealth motive, well, yes, obviously nothing's going to get done about it. Yes, okay, simple truth, very simple truth, right there in front of you. Just like how maybe you should have partial control over your workplace. Maybe you should have shared control over your workplace so you can have more leverage of your working conditions. And just like how we have democracy in society, you have democracy in your workplace, you have democracy in the public domain, maybe you should have democracy when you go to work. Very simple truth. But you have to, oh no, desperately suppress that and lie about it. coming back to that, by the way, basically, people are losing faith in democracy because we've only got one half of it. We haven't got the full picture. Under capitalism, again, profit motive. If you have a capitalist class, otherwise known as the bourgeoisie, that's the technical term, the bourgeoisie, they are obviously going to want to take control of the media. Again, very obvious, very simple steps here, very plain to see. They're obviously going to want to take control of the media to keep their beliefs propagating. And, you know, what's my train of thought slightly? And if you are living in an environment where a very, very small segment of the population are the only real ones having their views and perspectives prioritized, democracy can become pretty meaningless. We are in, most of us, I mean, I don't know about, maybe, I don't know, but at least most of the Western people watching this video will be in democracies. Even in America, it's still technically, institutionally a democracy. Even if the government is ideologically fascist, the takeover hasn't finished yet. It hasn't been completed. So we're all living in democracy, but no one feels represented whatsoever. No one feels represented. So nobody feels represented. Why? That's because democracy relies on elections. Elections rely on votes. And what the people's votes rely on? Guess, like it's Mickey Mouse, go on. People's votes rely on information. And if your if your information environment is profoundly poisoned enough, democracy can become meaningless. It can become useless. It can become flaccid. It can just become completely inoperable. Democracy can be undermined if your information environment is bad enough. And is that not almost destined to happen necessarily if it is under the control of the bourgeoisie? Because here's the thing, when people have material conditions and they have material interests, which time and time and time again under a neoliberal capitalist framework are not met, their demands keep not being met, they keep getting more and more emotionally angry, frustrated for years and decades and generations, and it passes down. And they're not being represented still. The media is never going to them. They will start to look for other things. Other things in democracy, I mean. And most likely, that other thing is fascism. Because the bourgeoisie will never, ever, ever pick socialism over fascism. They will always allow fascism more than socialism. Because fascism doesn't necessarily have to take away private ownership of the means of production. Doesn't have to happen. Socialism is defined by workers' ownership of the means of production. Another thing that is imminent, and it shows that socialism is not just good, it's not just like, oh, a nice thing, we need it. And capitalism is not sustainable, and socialism is far more sustainable than capitalism. Another thing that shows that is speculative financial bubbles that lead to crashes. Right now, we are in a financial bubble. The AI bubble. If you look at any stats, maybe I'll link some stuff. You should be able to do your own research, but I'll link whatever shit. I'll probably give 10 bloody links in the description, right? But if you look at any stats, the ratio of profit that companies like Nvidia and OpenAI make compared to their stock valuation are mental. And this ratio is a metric that is used to determine how fake a stock is, you could say, on the stock market. Now, I believe I saw some sort of video essay 2 days ago where it said for most of these companies, they surveyed most of these companies that are specifically about AI. Not so Microsoft has other things going for them, but AI companies that are majorly involved, they tend to have a 20 times stock valuation to revenue ratio. In the dot-com bubble in 1999, 2000, 2001, it was lower than that. And the dot-com bubble obviously burst. Everybody thought that, loads of investors all throughout America were getting lots and lots of speculative investment for their startup, their new startup that was going to be online. The internet was becoming mass media for the first time. Everyone wanted a website. Everyone wanted their own tech startup. Lots and lots of tech startups got a lot of hype from investors. Those investors hedged their bets. They speculated. And the bubble burst, and lots of businesses went under. Thankfully, the dot-com bubble was not super tied to the broader economy. There was not lots and lots. It was not holding up the whole stock market. The dot-com bubble was not holding up the whole stock market. But the AI bubble kind of is. So what happens is... Okay, so Marx wrote about this. I need to brush up on my Marx. I really need to read Marx. But he didn't write about AI chips. But here's something that happens under capitalism. Here's something that will always happen under capitalism. It is a necessary part of the system. Revenue gets extracted out of what you could call the real economy and put into the fake speculative economy. And instead of cycling through the actual economy, so, John the baker sells some bread to Timmy the kid. His parents gave some of their wages to Timmy to go buy the bread. Timmy sneaks 50p and he goes and buys a toffee as well, and then the baker uses that money, and then some crazy kid breaks his window. He pays the glazier to fix the window, and then the baker, he goes and buys some flowers for his wife, and then he pays his taxes with some of that money, and then he buys some more bread, and then and it all cycles through the actual economy. It's actually connected to real products and services. What always happens under capitalism, and necessarily happens, and it's happened several times before, is money gets funneled out of that real economy and it gets floated up into this speculative fake economy where it doesn't come down again. There's a graph. I will definitely link this graph. Please look at this graph in the description. And it shows the incestuous relationship between Nvidia and a lot of other major AI companies, where they will just basically pass money in between each other to inflate the stock valuations. Their valuations are not actually linked to products they are making. They are not good faith evaluations of the service that they provide the market. It's this unsustainable, horrible runaway bubble where, and it's a cycle where more and more private investors invest. They have a lot of leverage on hand, not liquidity, not cash. Cash and existing, standing, stable money is the bane of a capitalist. It always has to be loans upon loans upon loans, leverage upon leverage upon leverage. But they have a lot of leverage floating up top that a very small number of companies can just cycle around and around amongst each other or they can go to banks and they can get a little bit of liquidity. I say a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a little bit, but tens of billions of liquidity hedged from their leverage. Because if you just say, oh, I've got $1 trillion, even if you don't really, that's not been sold, that's your share evaluation. You haven't liquidated those shares into cash. If you just say to a bank, oh, I've got $1 trillion, because this whole system is built on faith in unfaithful people, and it's all built on a house of cards. The bank will say, why not? Here's 5 billion or 10 billion in actual liquidity, and then that liquidity can be passed around a very small number of companies that are involved in that very specific thing to show that there's some sort of economic activity being done. And because you're all under the agreement, you don't actually need to trade any goods or services for that money. You can just keep it cycling. There's a meme, and it's like, man founds country with highest GDP per capita on Earth by founding it with two men that just pass a dollar bill between them all the time, constantly. And if you do that, and if you have your own country with a population of 2, and they just pass a dollar bill back and forth from each other, well done. You've got the highest GDP per capita of any country in the world. You can fudge economic activity very easily. And it doesn't necessarily even matter about how badly you do it. You just have to keep the illusion okay enough so that people have faith, that other people have faith, that those people have faith, that there is something called value there. Until something disrupts that. Until some segment of your investors get spooked. Then it all comes falling down. That's how stock bubbles work. Right now, the AI bubble has captured lots and lots of money in a fake, speculative form that does not have any real world equivalent or security. There are trillions floating up there that can just pop. And when the bubble bursts, we could potentially be looking at Wall Street crash level of things. That's another one. Because this AI bubble is just the most recent example. This always happens. This is a fundamental consequence of capitalism. The 2008 financial crash. I wonder what happened there. Speculative real estate investment. People kept over leveraging on property because there was this just general trust, this general faith that houses would always keep their value. Banks bet again and again, and then they betted on those bets, and they betted on those bets on the equity of houses. And then as soon as there was a little disruption, they realised, oh, we've over leveraged, we've over gambled, shit. And then the economy got worse for everyone. That's obviously always going to happen under capitalism. Why would it not? There is a group of people that you are incentivizing to be irresponsible and evil. You are rewarding them for doing that. The Wall Street crash. There weren't as many controls on the stock market back then. And again, before the credit crunch, they put in some controls. These neoliberal governments, they get people rage at them and they put in some sort of controls. They try and plaster over the cracks. Before the Wall Street crash, there was very few controls. And people were investing willy-nilly. I say people, but the bourgeoisie were investing willy-nilly. Their money was not being put into cash. It was not being put into gold. It was not being put into land. It was being invested into businesses. And then they get loans off of their wealth that they got from those businesses, and then they'd invest that into more businesses, and they'd leverage that again. There wasn't enough cash in the safe. Not just for the investors, but the banks. The banks were over-investing. They were over-leveraging because of course they would. They live in a system that incentivizes that. And then the Great Depression happened, and hundreds of thousands of people in the West starved to death. The Wall Street crash, the 2008 financial crisis, the AI bubble, things like this will keep happening and will keep leading to financial crashes where, because the working class, and that includes what people consider the middle class, but in a Marxist sense it's still the working class, but the working class loses out a lot more than the bourgeoisie, and because no one else is capable of investing, the working class and the middle class are not capable of investing and taking control of property, control of commerce, control of media, the bourgeoisie who caused this take further control. Since the 2008 financial crash, more of commerce, of property, of media has been consolidated in the top 0.1%, in the top 1%. More of it, not less. The system didn't come crashing down, and yeah, a few fucking Wall Street traders threw themselves out of windows, but as a class, as a demographic of people, even after the 2008 financial crisis, the bourgeoisie were better off, and the oligarchy were better off. Same with the Wall Street crash. It seems like it'll be the same with the AI bubble. This is going to happen under capitalism. If speculative, abstract investments become a thing, which there's no reason why they wouldn't under capitalism, obviously it makes much more sense financially to invest on investments on investments on investments instead of opening a bakery, opening a barber's, starting a supermarket chain. Why would you ever do something like that? Why would you ever start a business that actually provides a product or a service when you can just invest on investments, on loans, on leverage things, on speculation, on loans, on investments, on and contribute to this bubble of all of our wealth is getting put into this thing that doesn't come back. The velocity of money and the circulation of money is broken. That's always going to happen under capitalism. And it's always going to be a priority to have profit over the existence of humanity on this planet in regards to climate change. There are several imminent factors where things are just going to keep getting worse. Things are just going to keep getting worse under capitalism, and there's no reason why it's going to stop. There needs to be underlying systematic change of socialism. If you are an entrepreneur, you should believe that capitalism is bad. Because capitalism warps the organic aspects of supply and demand. When it comes to real estate as well. Do you think that the reason that property is so expensive is because that's a genuine reflection of supply and demand? No, real estate is used as an investment tool by pension funds, banks, hedge funds, individual very rich investors. The reason is that, the reason that in the past 100 years house prices have times by 10, 20, 30, depends where you go, is not what increase of the population and just the natural supply and demand of the housing market. Get your head out the clouds. It's commodification, it's speculative investment. That's where it all goes. The reason that a house costs 400 grand in a lot of parts of the world is not because there aren't enough houses to go round. That's a baby, that's a toddler's way of thinking about this. Capitalism warps the natural progression of supply and demand. Capitalism warps organic markets. If you are an entrepreneur, you should believe that capitalism is bad. If you believe in markets, if you want market trade and market enterprise, you should believe that capitalism is bad. If you are some sort of right-winger, you should believe that capitalism is bad. If you have principles that make you economically right-wing, I believe in the markets, I believe in the free market, you should believe that capitalism is bad. Capitalism, it does not facilitate free markets. Capitalism warps free markets. You could have completely free markets in between businesses under socialism, but those businesses would have to be controlled by the workers. You can have whatever commerce you want between businesses fairly owned by the people who work there, democratically owned. If you believe in supply and demand, you should believe that capitalism is bad and you should be a socialist. If you believe in industry, and if you believe in unions, if you believe in the power of labour unions, you should believe that capitalism is bad and be a socialist. Because the incentive, the massive overriding incentive of capitalism is to take capital away from the real economy, the bricks, the mortar, the steel, the industry. Take it away from that, take all the wealth, all the resources away from that and put it into this bullshit hippie Silicon Valley nothing economy, this fake economy. It doesn't do anything. That's not helping the industry in your area. It's not helping the industry in your country. If you're from an old industrial town, you think that shit's helping? You think capitalism is helping your industrial town? Get your head out the stars. Got some other notes here. I got some other notes here. Oh yeah. Now we get on to these very low IQ counter arguments that have been propagated in the media for decades. So here's one you might have heard before. 100 gorillion, squantillion, quadrillion people have died due to socialism. Believe it or not, no. Yeah, okay, so when people say, well, I believe the well-quoted figure is 100 million apparently, 100 million people have died due to socialism. Okay, this ties into another thing. So, Stalin and Mao killed a lot of people. They were dictators and they killed a lot of people. Both they intentionally did that and also just under their government a lot of people died. For various reasons, as people do die. So firstly, neither Stalin nor Mao were socialists. Which ties into another thing I've got written down. Socialism has never been tried properly. Now that's close to being true. It's being very generous with the word properly. It's meant to conjure up images of immaturity. Where it's like, no, it's meant to sound like desperate. And make an image of, please, just one more time, it's not been tried properly. Take that phrase and take out the word properly. It's not that it hasn't been tried properly. It hasn't even been done. I believe you could find some socialist societies in history. Which reminds me, I think that my next video will be a research stream. But, no, not properly. It's not that it's not been tried properly. It hasn't been done. There have been, at least in modern history, 0 socialist societies. None. 0. If the workers don't own the means of production, It's not a socialist country. Stalin was a dictator. Mao was a dictator. And they both operated within capitalist systems. It's a classless, stateless, moneyless society. There was certainly a state, there was certainly money. To a certain extent, depending on how you define class, there was certainly class. And the workers didn't own the means of production. A lot of production was not only state-controlled in a very wide sort of sense, it was actually under the direct control of the dictator. That's not even public control. If you want to be a bit unfaithful and expand it, okay, so public control, I guess you could make it government control if you want to interpret it in a strange, irresponsible, immature way. But even then, it's not government control, really. It really is coming under just the purview of Stalin and Mao and stuff like that. The 100 million figure comes from this place called the Black Book of Communism, which is a propaganda piece, which includes all the people who died under Stalin's quote-unquote communism, under his state. Have you ever heard the phrase communist state? That's an oxymoron. Communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society, which on its own is a really fucking stupid idea. I'm not a communist. I don't believe it's a fucking stupid idea. But this is the level that they're operating on. This is the level of media lies and propaganda that they're operating on. So the death figures included in the Black Book of Communism include all of the figures from the Holodomor. The Holodomor was a mass starvation event that took place over about 5 years in the Soviet Union. Now, for a few different reasons, one of them including Soviet mismanagement, millions of people starved in the Soviet Union. Nothing to say that's particularly a thing with socialism. Nothing to particularly link that with socialism, because, I mean, again, even beyond that, it's not a socialist country. It's capitalist, but they just lied. They lied. Believe it or not, they lied. Woo! Let me give you a little bit of history. Lenin was a genuine socialist. Lenin led the revolution against the Russian monarchy. He died like 5 years later, and he said to everyone around him, he said, don't let Stalin gain power, whatever you do. He dies, I think it was polio or something. What did they do? They let Stalin get in. No workers control the means of production. No communism. They still have money. They still have private control of the means of production. It's just, the state has a lot of authority over those private individuals. There's still class, there's still money. And then because of general government mismanagement and bad weather conditions, there was also a few really bad seasons, crop seasons. Millions died. Everyone who was executed for whatever reason counted as a victim of communism. And again, because those words are meant to be meaningless, like the obfuscation, part of taking away your ability to talk about these things is obfuscating it to the degree where there's no difference between any of these things. Communism equals socialism equals Marxism. They're very different things. Communism is a type of socialism. It's not like socialism in the way that I envision it. It's not what they call democratic socialism, which, again, I don't really like that term because the democracy came free with your socialism. Okay? It's just socialism. But you can have a look. They stretch it so much. Anyone who died for any reason, anyone who slipped on a banana peel in the Soviet Union is counted as a victim of socialism. So they get to this absolute bullshit figure of 100 million. No, just none of that is true. So that 100 quintillion people dying under socialism thing, just dispense. You can just dispense of that from your mind. Just forget about that. Actually, those were the two things that I want to go over. Yeah, 100 bajillion, and socialism has not been tried before. Yeah, those are the two stupid little phrases I wanted to go over. The rest of it is just sort of restating things that I ended up mentioning. So anyway, I hope you listen to this in good faith and I hope you don't just respond with whatever, again, little bumper sticker things you've been told on Fox News or whatever by your uncle. And I hope this has a slight change on the ideological environment. You know, I'm just doing my bit, just a drop in the ocean, trying to build some movements. I'm doing other stuff. I'm not just bloody making videos. There's other stuff going on in the background. I'll let you know. But I feel like my next video might be, specific research. Hold on. Here's a little thing about why socialism has never been tried. Okay. I said, didn't I? Capitalism, the bourgeoisie will never, ever cede ground to socialism if fascism is an option. And there are historical cases of this happening. This happened in France. This happened in Germany. This happened in Spain. This happened in Italy. There are 4 big, powerful, relevant countries. This happened basically in all the power centres of mainland Europe. In all of the power centres of mainland Europe. France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. All of the power centres. There was the opportunity for socialism, and the bourgeoisie instead massively sided with the massively supported fascism, and then fascism took over. A lot of you won't believe that because you probably watch Fox News or whatever, but next video, I'll see if I can get my streaming set up, but regardless whether it's a stream, whether it's a video, next time will be a proper research piece on those 4 examples. France, Germany, Spain, Italy, all of them, there was the opportunity for socialism or fascism. Guess who the bourgeoisie chose? Guess who the oligarchy chose? Fascism. And that's part of why socialism has not been tried. Not properly. It's not that socialism has not been tried properly, because that makes you sound like a fucking child. That's not what it is. It hasn't existed. We need to do it. And why do you think there's been such a desperate attempt to stop it from existing? That's what it'll be about. Hopefully, you've watched this in good faith, and hopefully this changes the ideological landscape just a little bit, and you might have took something away from this. And I would like to say that talking about it not really having been done before, the principles have been done before. And at the end of the day, if it got to it, if we tried to have workplace democracy, and for whatever reason, there's some sort of complex, unforeseen economic reason why it can't work, okay, let's not do it. Let's just not do it. Let's just have very, very powerful unions. Let's get as close as we can without getting to that point. But every time left-wing economic policy is enacted, every time socialist-adjacent policy is enacted, magically, coincidentally, people's lives get better. And every time we get close, every time people move a little bit closer, very rich people get very scared and start assassinating people and start paying a lot of money and getting very desperate in the media to stop that happening and to stop people's lives getting better. What can you conclude from that? What can you conclude from that? But yeah, I hope you learn a little bit something from this. I think I learned a little bit of something from just saying these things out loud. So, yeah. Try and have a very good day. See ya. Bye-bye.